Hello, everyone. Welcome to another weekly live stream with yours truly, Dr. Sarah L. Webb. I'm laughing a little bit because I was getting lost in a thought spiral. Not a bad thought spiral, but my mind was just like going on a journey. And I looked at the clock and it was like 1 minute after the hour. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm late for the live stream, but I'm here now. Not too late. Make sure I am live. Yeah, okay. So I am curious to know if anyone has gotten sick of colorism. And today I mean that in a more literal sense because the topic we're discussing is the impact of colorism on health and well-being, okay? And for me, colorism is something that is very frustrating. And on a recent podcast I did, the Red Lection podcast, I was asked, what would I be doing with my life if colorism never existed? And so full transparency, folks, I don't actually want to talk about colorism. I don't wish to talk about colorism. There are many other things I could be talking about. If you know, you know. But colorism does exist, and I really do not like the fact that it exists, so I talk about it as a way to create change, as a way to raise awareness and inspire people to take action to end colorism within themselves, their interpersonal relationships, and in their professional settings, etc. And so when I think about colorism and the impact on health and well-being, it goes back to the overall impact that oppression has on people, right? And so if you understand the trauma of things like racism and sexism and classism, then it's really not a stretch at all to understand how colorism, experiencing colorism as part of intersectional marginalization, is impacting your health and well-being. But it goes even further than that. And so I'm going to share some specific examples that are unique to colorism compared to other types of oppression that take a toll on our health and well-being, okay? This is part of an ongoing series on corporate colorism. And so as it applies in the workplace for businesses and companies, thinking about how you can acknowledge colorism as a stressor at work and the impact that it has on well-being, morale, overall employee morale, the ability to thrive, the ability to show up as your best self and achieve the level of performance that you want, right? This is the third or fourth. I think I have 3 more live streams after this one. Last week I said that I was going to take a break on my birthday weekend, but actually I will pre-record the video for next week. So you still get content that week. I will not be live like I usually am because, again, I'm going to be doing birthday things. But I still wanted to stay on the schedule. And so my last live stream will actually be on Juneteenth, Monday, June 19th, and I'm going to be talking about solutions. So the whole 16-week series has been about all the many ways that colorism shows up in business and the workplace, with ideas, strategies, tips, and tools along the way that people can implement to address it. But that last live episode, come with your questions, come with your ideas, come with your thoughts, because we're going to be taking all of what I've been sharing and teaching these past several weeks and applying it to solutions and strategies, okay? And then I'm going to take a summer hiatus, summer break, and I'll be back for the fall series as well. And on this live in particular, if you have questions and comments, do leave them in the chat. I will be taking your questions, responding to your comments a little bit. Oh, and also happy holiday. It's a holiday weekend for my United States audience, and so it's that much more meaningful to me that you all are showing up and participating on the holiday. If you're spending time with family, tell them hello. Tell them Dr. Webb said hey. Bring me a plate, okay? Save me a plate so I could come through, stop by, get some barbecue or whatever y'all do. I didn't mean to rhyme. It's just natural. All right, let me get back into the topic. But I do hope that y'all are enjoying the holiday weekend if you have off. I don't think it's a holiday weekend here in Costa Rica, but I know for many of you it is. So I want to share a little bit of the research. In many of my live streams, I start with some of the existing research on that particular subtopic. And so, as I mentioned in the past, colorism is often a neglected topic. It's often a neglected issue. And so the research studies in the medical field are not as robust as studies that are done on racism, but they are emerging, and there are enough studies out there to validate the need for continued research, right? So to the initial findings, the initial start is suggesting that there's a lot more that medical researchers and professionals need to do in terms of understanding the way that colorism shows up in healthcare and in health outcomes. But the existing and emerging research that has been done, shout out to those researchers, shows that experiencing colorism, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, just like experiencing racism, does take a toll on stress-related disorders, experiences of pain, cardiovascular health, things like hypertension, right, high blood pressure, and all that we typically associate with lowered or decreased wellness. The systemic impact, though, that I think is really interesting, has a lot to do with the interpersonal biases, the unconscious biases, right? And so, yes, experiencing colorism increases your level of stress, right? And so that has a biological impact on things like inflammation and, you know, all sorts of outcomes that come from that heightened sense of trauma, right? Or experiencing that trauma and the stress, right? So that's like sort of a biological consequence of experiencing the marginalization and discrimination of colorism. But then there's also the bias piece. So when you go to a hospital, when you're interacting with a nurse, when you're interacting with a doctor, we think about how bias and stereotypes play into that. And so a lot of the conversation focuses on racial stereotypes, on racial biases. But if you've been listening for the past 15 weeks, you know that colorism amplifies racial bias and amplifies stereotypes. So it's not just, oh, Black people have a lowered sensitivity to pain, but it's particularly those with darker skin, right? And I remember listening when I was a child, I was in high school, I remember listening to some of the elders in my presence about how they would hear nurses say things like, oh, well, their skin is like really, really tough. And so you have to like really jab them with the needle or something like that, right? And so when you're looking at perceptions and biases around like, oh, their skin is really, really tough, that is exacerbated. That's particularly for people who are darker skinned. So it's not like, oh, Black people have a higher resistance or higher tolerance to pain, but it's particularly those who look Black, right? And I'm keeping it honest, I'm keeping it 100. It's specifically for people who look Black, people who have darker skin, people who have fuller features, who have more Afro hair textures, right? Like those are the ones who are getting the brunt of those stereotypes. We are the ones who are getting the brunt of that bias. And so for a person who is racially Black, but they have very light skin or very fair skin, they're still treated more delicately than someone who has darker skin. So there's the second piece, right? So the biological impact of experiencing the discrimination and trauma of colorism, the unconscious bias that happens in the workplace. I even think about how I did a guest lecture for a composition class for nurses, for nursing students when I was at Mississippi State. And I shared the story. It was a recent story about a Black woman in Florida who died in the parking lot of an emergency room because they didn't believe her. They didn't believe that she couldn't breathe, so they called security. Security dragged her out of the hospital. She ended up dying in the parking lot of the emergency room. Again, the unconscious bias, the racial stereotypes. But this was a dark-skinned, plus-size, working-class woman, right? And so it's not just like, oh, any Black person, but particularly those who fit certain biases or certain stereotypes, right? I even think about Serena Williams' story, how this millionaire and her white husband, when she was giving birth to her child, Olympia, the article, the story about how she almost died giving childbirth because the healthcare professionals would not take seriously her pain, like what was going on with her during childbirth, right? And so some people have asked me in the past, you know, all the research studies on Black mothers and the mortality rates, you know, I think what happens is a lot of times people are afraid to have a colorism framework when they're doing that research, when they're collecting that data. Again, in previous episodes, I talked about why that is. Sometimes it's just harder to find that data because when you fill out forms on a hospital, you include your race and ethnicity, but you don't include your skin tone, right? So hospital forms, the data that hospitals collect do not include skin tone, right? And so it's just not as easy to access that data for the research. But what I was saying, how was even Serena Williams with all of her money, right, couldn't escape the stereotype of being a dark-skinned Black woman, right? And how they perceived her as not needing help, of not needing care and attention and resources and medical support at that time, right? And imagine, right, people who don't have her money. Imagine people who don't have her resources. Imagine people who don't have, a partner who is advocating with you, right? And so this is, so many things are coming into my mind. Because I was even talking about, I left a comment and I've been talking about the experiences of biracial folks versus people who are monoracial, right? Who have two Black parents versus a Black parent and a non-Black parent. And so what I was saying is, like, white mothers who give birth to mixed race children are not experiencing the same levels of stress and trauma that Black mothers are experiencing, right? And so when we talk about the tangible, real, visceral differences in being a biracial person versus being a non-mixed person, particularly if your mother is white, like you gestated in a womb that did not have to compensate for medical racism, for legacies and centuries of intergenerational trauma and racism, right? And so there's a difference. There's a serious difference in that. Okay, I'm gonna progress here because that topic is expansive. It's really expansive. And y'all know I only have 30 minutes for this. Okay, so there's the unconscious bias piece, but then there's also the systemic architecture, the actual technology. And so even without interpersonal interactions that are biased and discriminatory, colorism is built into a lot of the technology. And there was one popular study on the pulse oximeters that I've shared before in different spaces, and how this device, which you put on the finger to measure levels of oxygen in the blood, has repeatedly shown to be inaccurate and to misread the oxygen levels in people with more pigment, people with darker pigment, people with darker skin tones. They said it could even be, if the results can even be thrown off if you have a dark nail polish on your fingers, right? And so one of the many reasons why I abandoned TikTok is just because of the trolling in the comments or whatever. But it just so happens that the last time I shared about this publicly was on TikTok. And the very disappointing and discouraging thing to me was how so many Black healthcare professionals were in my comments trying to discredit the research, trying to say like, oh, this doesn't matter because all Black people experience medical racism, and so the skin tone has nothing to do with it. I'm just like, how are we as professionals, trained professionals, like just outright denying and ignoring the research? And it was one article, one video, but there have been multiple articles, multiple studies that have shown the same thing with this particular medical device. And as I'm talking, if you want to like a direct link to any of these research studies, the blog posts that'll come out tomorrow, as well as the LinkedIn article that'll come out tomorrow, will have direct hyperlinks so you can go straight to the source on all these things. I'm really doing very brief summaries and overviews of what the research and the findings are. So I think that that's one of the biggest barriers into really integrating colorism into the conversation, is that it's so disappointing to me, like to think about it, but even Black healthcare professionals, Black healthcare researchers are completely dismissive of the topic of colorism. And so how do we expect anyone else in this industry to pay attention, to take it seriously, if the people who are advocating around medical racism don't even care about it? Right? And so I've said it before in terms of like just work in corporate culture and, activism around anti-racism, but anyone who's focusing on medical racism and has never attempted to consider colorism as a variable, you are sabotaging the work. Okay? I'm just going to say it. You're sabotaging the work of addressing medical racism if you are not actively considering colorism as a variable. And we know that all issues are intersectional. So I mentioned the example of the woman in Florida who died in the parking lot. She was also a plus size woman, right? And so it's not enough, y'all, to just be like, oh, well, all Black people experience medical racism, and so that's it. No, we have to be honest about the particular intersections that are playing out in these spaces. The pulse oximeter, I think that conversation, some of the pushback and the denial was, oh, well, they're saying dark-skinned people, but to white people, we're all dark-skinned. No, nope. This device is not coming from the subjective perspective of what white people say is dark skin, right? Like the study is not, oh, what does this white person think dark skin is, right? No, it's like a metric. The darker your skin tone, the more inaccurate the readings. And so I really am just like in doing the whole corporate colorism series, seeing how unwilling even Black people are to care. And it's sad, I'm feeling a little like emotional right now because I see a lot of the activists and educators I follow on anti-racism. A lot of them complain about how white people respond to their work. Imagine doing this work and getting the same kind of reactions from Black people. Whew, okay, I need to go on because I really am like feeling emotional right now. But it's really discouraging that, if I only had to worry about like the MAGA folks being in my comments, but when it's other Black people and when it's other Black people who claim to be aware and woke about things like racism, it's very discouraging. So thank you to those who do get it. Thank you to those who do care and who take this seriously, because I'm kind of tired and exhausted of DEI leaders, people who, I've been doing diversity and equity work for 20 years and just are clueless about the impact that colorism has. It's extremely frustrating. So, okay, whew, I think I can compose myself. Okay, so in terms of other research on colorism, a lot of it deals with mental health, right? So there's no surprise there that of the healthcare research done on colorism, the vast majority of it has focused on mental health disparities and mental health outcomes. And so there's no surprise that anyone who experiences colorism has often negative consequences in terms of their, self-esteem, the experiences of it. And a lot of my coaching clients, for example, talk about how until they started discussing colorism and understanding colorism, they had reached a plateau in their healing. They had reached a plateau in working with therapists and doing their mental health work. And then, so unlocking the narratives around colorism really helped them to then progress, right? And to push through the plateau of how far they were able to get with their mental wellness. And so that's definitely something I think in the physical healthcare, but also mental health care practices. A lot of my people come to me for coaching because one, their therapist doesn't always feel equipped or is not always equipped to adequately address colorism. In my instances, I remember having a white therapist once and I started talking about colorism and her response like, oh, all people get bullied, right? And so there's a lot of work to do even in the healthcare profession. And the lack of cultural competency is just rampant for all social issues, colorism being one of them, okay? So insights and key takeaways before I do affirmation homework and respond to your questions and comments. Now I'm nervous about looking at your comments because oh no, what are people gonna say? Okay, but one, I want companies and people in charge of groups of people to reconsider your policies, but also your biases about personal time off, sick leave, remote work, health insurance, and other forms of care and support, right? Having daycare centers on site, on the job site, right? Not only do we need to reconsider the policies for those things, but we also need to reconsider the biases about people who take advantage of those things, right? So let's say, technically, we all get this amount of personal time off, but people judge you if you actually use it. people will judge you, especially if you're a black person, a dark-skinned black person, a plus size or a disabled black person, right? Like, oh, you're just being lazy. Claudia Rankin wrote the book Citizen. I highly recommend it. It's a difficult read because it's very, like, it's about the trauma that black people face because of racism. But she was talking about how a white colleague addressed her, microaggressions. I talked about that last week, and said, oh, well, you're always off. You're always like on vacation. You're always on vacation. And so in the book, she's like, I have the exact same vacation schedule as all my other colleagues, right? I have the exact same sabbatical schedule as all my colleagues. So that perception that I'm somehow scheming or like getting over on the system, right? Like that perception that black people are inherently lazy or don't want to work, all those negative stereotypes, right? And so again, for companies to create a culture of equity and inclusion, it's not enough to just have these policies in place, but you also have to do the active work of addressing the biases towards people who need these policies, towards people who use these policies. Because I even think about it in terms of disability and like accessibility, right? And like needs around like whether it's be physical access or greater access for people with neurodivergency, and people saying, oh, well, why do you need accommodations? Like, I'm not getting extra help, you know what I mean? And so like, it's not just like, are these things in place, but are we also addressing the biases that people project onto people who use these services and who use these resources, okay? Now, the second thing is, going back to the other point, is when you are studying and talking about and addressing medical racism, be sure to have colorism as one of the variables. And I'm just going to leave it at that. And then lastly is for my dark-skinned people, especially dark-skinned women, dark-skinned mothers. We are validated in prioritizing our self-care and prioritizing our well-being. The research suggests that we do face greater stress and discrimination because of things like colorism, misogyny, like all those things. And so you don't have to feel bad for taking an extra day. You don't have to feel bad for asking for extra support. You don't have to feel bad for asking your doctor to follow up with you, right? For advocating that your support systems show up for you when and how you need them to. That you know what you need, but also we're all here in this conversation to say you are not delusional in knowing that you have those specific needs, okay? So again, this is part of the Corporate Colorism series. I do public speaking, consulting, and trainings on this topic if you'd like more. Your homework, I'm excited about today's homework, this week's homework, is to prioritize your wellness this week. Whatever that means for you. In my support group last night, I have a support group for dark-skinned black women. I talked about how I have seborrheic dermatitis, okay? And so that means I have to wash my hair more often than other black people usually wash their hair in order to manage it. And so I prioritize that. I do wash my hair as often as I need to in order to manage and care for my seborrheic dermatitis, right? So whatever wellness looks like for you this week, I want you to really lean into it, right? Like, do the most with your wellness routines, with your wellness self-care practices this week. Like, go all out, okay? And then your affirmation is, I am learning how to take great care of myself. I'm learning how to take great care of myself. And sometimes, folks, learning how to take great care of yourself includes asking for other people to step in and help you and support you in that care, okay? All right, whew. That was a lot. I need a break. All right, let's look at your comments. All right, Marnika, hey, I'm glad you tuned in. Hey, Aya, hey, Michael. Let's see if we have any questions or comments. So Jasmine on YouTube says, I was just in the Caribbean on vacation as the only light-skinned person in my dark-skinned West African featured family, and the colorism was disturbing. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay. That what you said is really important. My mom shared with me the United States advisory for dark-skinned African Americans traveling to the Dominican Republic in particular, because of the discrimination against Haitians, right? And so being, again, the perception of your features and your skin tone and your hair texture being a source of profiling and discrimination. So it's real. Yeah, it's Gemini season. Let's see. The childbirth experience is real. I know, yeah. And I haven't given birth to any children, but I have a lot of people in my family who do. And it's something that if I ever do have children, it is something that I have to consider, right? LinkedIn user says, I'm literally sick of colorism. It's true about the pulse oximeter. Medical racism obviously affects darker skin tones at a higher rate. Aya says, anyone saying that is absurd. To white people, we are not all dark skinned. That sounds absurd, like really, really absurd. Like, come on. I agree. I think if you were a white person with an olive skin tone, right? Like they might say, oh, you're dark, right? But when we're talking about like black people, for example, like they definitely see me as different than a Beyonce, right? Oh, they see the difference for sure. Yeah, thanks, Michael. LinkedIn user says, it makes me emotional too. I grew up in a family with people who primarily have lighter skin. Yeah. Our humanity stands, period. Okay? I know. Aya says, I don't think any person of color should be seeing a white therapist ever. Their ignorance is dangerous. Yeah, well, in my location, therapists that were available in person were very limited. And when I did switch to a therapist of color, they had other problematic things going on. And I haven't consistently had the same therapist for very long. I've kind of cycled through multiple different therapists, either because I moved to a different state or because my therapist retire. I've had 2 therapists retire on me, so I've gone through multiple therapists. Okay. This YouTuber, hey, how you doing? CC Chi. I wash my hair daily, but I've noticed papaya really controls dryness. Oh, cool. Thanks for that. I'm glad you like the homework. All right. And then Michael says, get that self-care, soul care poppin'. All right. So that's LinkedIn, YouTube comments, Instagram, fam. Y'all know I got to come through and see what y'all been talking about. See what y'all been discussing. Y'all were active today. I did notice that. Sometimes y'all are quiet. Donna Goodson says it is a very important topic. Colorism can destroy family relationships as much as social relationships. Oh yeah, colorism has definitely destroyed family. Yeah, I'm seriously like people who stop talking to their parents because of colorism, right? Kindly Keisha says, happy Memorial Day. I need a plate. Child, me too. I need a plate. Colorism amplifies racism. Yeah, Insu Consulting in the house. I see you, fam. Insu Consulting. I love the logo. Okay. Kindly Keisha says, I was going to say Serena Williams. Yeah. When I was talking to a colleague of color, so not anyone that would be identified as white. They were also a person of color. They weren't black, but they were brown. And they were like, oh, well, maybe it was the hospital. Like they were trying to say like, oh, well, certain hospitals, if they are like free clinics or something like that, then they just have worse service. And so I was like, well, no, Serena Williams can afford to go to any hospital she wants to go to. It wasn't a matter of like, oh, the resources just aren't there or the staffing just isn't there. No, it was racism and colorism and misogyny and war. Okay? Yeah. Is there a difference between colorism and shadeism? Not to my knowledge. So in all of the conversations I've seen around colorism and shadeism, they're describing the same system. They just have used different terms for it. Colorism is the more popular term for various reasons. I think because some of the people who have bigger platforms use the term colorism. But most people who say shadeism are talking about the same phenomenon in the same system. Donna Goodson says, I experienced that when I had a car accident. Because of head injuries, I could not be sedated. They had to perform surgery without sedating me. I heard the doctor saying she has such a high tolerance for pain. Oh my gosh, Donna. Oh, I'm so sorry. That is, okay. Yeah, I'm glad you're here and that you're on the other side of that for sure. So skin tone matters. Let's not pretend. Insu Consulting has a really good point in terms of what I was saying about Black healthcare professionals ignoring colorism. Saying it's not surprising because trained professionals have been trained by and through dominant systems. And racism could be internalized, Evelyn and B74 for sure. Thank you kindly, Keisha. I love you too. Yeah. Thank you. I know. I'm taking a little extra time since it's the holiday. I'm figuring y'all ain't got to get back to work, so we can hang out a little bit longer. Black Love Project. Hey, how you doing? I like this Black Love Project. I support you so much. Some people don't realize how much privilege they have based on their skin color, even if, quote unquote, we're all Black. Yeah, thank you for saying that, Black Love Project. Kindly Keisha, you're always on vacation. Answer, you are always in my business and not drinking enough water. That's a good comeback, I have to say. I like that comeback. And then Insu Consulting says, and forget the research, our bodies tell us we face more. We know. Oh yeah, we know. And so when I say stuff like believe dark-skinned Black women, that's what I'm talking about. Because ain't nobody gonna know what we feeling more than us. You know what I'm saying? Like, come on now. I am being and learning how to take great care of myself. Yes, Insu Consulting. Oshun says, we can't say white people invented colorism, but somehow they cannot see the difference. Right? Okay. You know. Maybe it was the hospital or doctor for Serena. All right, y'all. Live streams are so fun because of y'all. I mean, I have a Gemini stellium, so I love to talk, I love to write, I love to teach. But I mean, what makes it more fun is like doing it live. I feel like I'm hosting a house party every time I do this, like an educational house party, like a cathartic house party, but a house party nonetheless. Thank you, LinkedIn user says, I love this and the work you're doing on this topic so much, Dr. Sarah. Happy Memorial Day. Thank you. You too. Diane James on YouTube. Thank you for this. Research showed Black doctors scored just as bad on racism in the hospital or medical setting. Saw this recently. Yeah, absolutely. And it goes back to even how Black police officers can kill unarmed Black people, right? And so y'all have already been saying it in the comments and things like that. But yes, it's not just white medical professionals who are perpetuating medical racism and colorism. All of us have to unlearn. We all have to unlearn. All right, this has been very emotional for me, so I'm gonna go like get some ice cream and then take a nap. But I won't be live next week, but I will record a video and stream it for you all to see for next week. My birthday is June 6th. If you want to holler at your girl, I probably won't respond right away because again, I'll be deeply invested in my birthday shenanigans. But I'll be thinking about y'all, and I'm gonna miss y'all. I'm excited to be back for the live stream on June 12th, which is Aya's birthday. Oh, and Ama's birthday too. So yes. Okay, much love to y'all. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. You'll see me in 1 week. I'll see y'all in 2 weeks. How about that? All right, much love. Take care.